Over the next 10 years, Australia is going to be the focus of world attention for anyone with an interest in sport. Between now and 2032, Australia will be hosting a series of sporting events of global significance. And while it may not be immediately apparent, this has very major consequences for real estate investment. So let me explain what I mean. Firstly, here's the lineup of global sporting events that will be happening in Australia over the next 10 years. Next year is the FIFA Women's World Cup to be held in Australia as well as New Zealand. In 2026, the Commonwealth Games will be held in locations throughout regional Victoria. 2027, the Rugby World Cup for men will be hosted by Australia. 2 years later, in 2029, the Rugby World Cup for women will be occurring throughout Australia. And then, of course, the big one in 2032, the Olympic Games in Brisbane and other parts of Queensland. So think about that for a moment. 3 World Cups, a Commonwealth Games and an Olympic Games in the space of 10 years. Now think about what that means for investment in infrastructure, for tourism, for economic activity, for employment, and as a consequence, for demand for real estate. When you're hosting a major world sporting event, there needs to be multi-billion-dollar investment in infrastructure by government. And it's not just the sporting facilities, but also in transport infrastructure and in tourism infrastructure. In expectation of these events, private enterprise will also invest in accommodation, in tourist attractions, and in real estate developments. So this promises to be a bonanza for economies and for real estate markets right around Australia. And it brings home once again the message about how important infrastructure spending is for real estate markets. I've often said to people interested in real estate, if you want a simple philosophy to guide your investing decisions, one that has been shown to work for investors over time, it's this: buy property that lies in the path of progress. Another way of putting it is follow the infrastructure trail. Infrastructure spending is a very powerful factor when it comes to investing in residential property. One of the key elements we look for in areas we're comfortable to recommend to our investor clients is the infrastructure spend. It's highly influential in a number of different ways. During construction, it generates a lot of economic activity locally, and it creates jobs. And from that comes demand for real estate. And once complete, that new infrastructure adds to the appeal and amenity of a location, whether it's new highways or rail links or hospitals or universities or schools. Many of those types of infrastructure create ongoing employment and economic activity, particularly hospitals and universities. A new airport creates a massive new employment zone because of all the commercial and industrial operations that set up beside it. And new transport links can attract businesses to set up operations in an area which has become more accessible. And all of that leads to property price growth. This factor is particularly relevant in the current economic climate impacted by COVID, inflation, and rising interest rates. It's clear to me that state and federal governments have been trying to generate an infrastructure-led economic recovery and are pouring big money into projects as a way to generate economic growth. And those major sporting events I mentioned at the start of the broadcast are going to be an additional, very major element.